Hi, my name is Ali Mika, as you just said. I'm a back-end developer and a sysadmin. I've been doing a lot of work for decades with systems, not unlike mostly Drupal, but also Django and other content management systems. I'm really attracted to things that are easy, the things that are easy to get started, that get people excited to work with them. I love being able to, point and click my way to victory using like a Drupal UI. I love teaching people to use fields and views, but that comes at a huge cost, right? So, I mean, if you're using a database to describe the structure of the database, and then you have to run 100 queries before you can figure out the data models that you can use to run new queries, you're going to pay for that. Right, so you get some definite performance and implications with all the convenience that comes with the content management system. And also, while it's really easy to get started, you just it often ends up being really prescriptive, right? So you've got a lot of special events, special functionality that you need to embed. You need to learn a whole different API. You need to learn a whole system in order to work from inside of the content management system. I had written some in-house, whatever customer database or something for my old business in Drupal, and I spent so much time upgrading it from Drupal 4.7 to 5. That was a big one. And then 5 to 6, and then 6, and it just like having to kind of roll with that just to have custom functionality seemed a little bit sort of backwards. So I have kind of been on the lookout for something that makes me feel as excited as I do about something that's easy to get started and efficient and rewarding to work on, but also doesn't keep you kind of constrained or confined into a specific methodology or process. And so what I'm going to talk about today is my latest finding, which is FastAPI. It's a relatively new framework. It's built in Python. It requires a current version of Python, none of this 2 point whatever stuff, like it's a 3.5 or 3.6 or higher. And it allows you to develop a REST API very quickly and very efficiently with very few errors. And it actually runs about as fast as a Go application. So it's actually really rewarding on multiple counts. Maybe talk a little bit about Python first. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's actually one of the most sort of desired programming languages out there right now, according to Indeed.com. So recruiters are on the lookout for Python, if nothing else. And it's also really, really fast growing. And I think a big reason for that is it's easy for someone who has expertise in a different area to just kind of pick up the language. And so it's starting to show up a lot in machine learning or Internet of Things, hardware integration stuff, image processing, cloud automation, data science, all these areas where you've got expertise and then you just want to sort of add programming to it. And so you might have data that's in Python or behind the Python library already, and you might want to be putting that on the web. And so maybe using something like FastAPI to do that would be a good way to make that happen. I don't know. The best thing to do, I think, right now is to just get started with a quick demonstration or a little demonstration application. And I'm going to, all the code I'm going to use is like basically in PyCharm, which if you use PHP Storm, it will look very familiar. I had no idea JetBrains was a sponsor of this conference, but hi JetBrains. If you like PyCharm, maybe you'll win a raffle. So you just go into your IDE and you create a little project. And the most important thing to make sure you're doing is using an interpreter that's at least Python 3.6, right? Because we're using new functionality. Then you log in and you start your little project, and you can use a command line tool of your operating system if you want, or you can use the terminal that's built into this IDE and run this command, pip install FastAPI. That's how we install third-party libraries. And so it's going to go out and it's going to go download it and install it. Not unlike Composer. But you'll find that it installs the latest version of FastAPI and also something called PYDANTIC, and something called STARLETTE. And so FastAPI is a combination of those two libraries, PYDANTIC and STARLETTE, with a little bit of secret sauce that has some developer-focused tools and ways to make you be a more efficient developer. And so first of all, PYDANTIC is based on a more recent Python feature of a more recent Python feature of type hinting. And basically what that is you can create a expectation when you create a variable of what that variable's data type might be. It makes Python appear, at least to your IDE and to the people reading your code, as a strongly typed language. It still isn't, it's still a recommendation. But I mean, if you're familiar with using a lot of PHP or Python that's not strongly typed, you may be aware that you can create a variable and set it to a string and then reset it to an integer and then add a string and an integer together and God knows what you'll get back. And then you can evaluate the whole thing as a Boolean. And sometimes that's really handy, and sometimes that is a really terrible idea. And so type hinting lets you declare what your expected data type is. And as I say, Python considers it a recommendation so that your IDE, et cetera, will throw a big error if you use the wrong data type, but the code will run just fine. So on top of type hinting is a library called PYDANTIC, which extends that type annotations and performs data validation. And then it can, because you've got a data type that might be a dictionary or something like that, you can have it export it to JSON or convert it or validate it. And so FastAPI relies on PYDANTIC to define requirements and generate documentation and convert data between different data models. STARLETTE is an async framework. And that's like your asynchronous server gateway interface. Basically, asynchronous code allows the server to take care of tasks while it's waiting for some external function to complete. So if you're just in a piece of code and you're going to go make a database call and you've got network latency, and then you're going to go hit the database and it's going to do a query and take some time to return the results, that time is dead to you, right? You're just going to, like, your whole app comes screeching to a halt and it's kind of just running its fingers on the table waiting for that that network response to come back. Async code lets you populate that dead time with running other functionality and other executions of functions. Obviously, your code needs to be async aware because it, could be a problem. But it's that type of processing is what has made Go a efficient, a fast language to work in. And in recent versions of Python, support async as well. So STARLETTE builds on top of async. It builds a whole bunch of HTTP stuff, right? So you get GraphQL and WebSockets and sessions and cookies, and it's fast. It's super fast. And then FastAPI in turn builds on top of STARLETTE. So FastAPI kind of marries those two things together, PYDANTIC and STARLETTE, and then adds its own secret sauce. The next thing you want to do to get your little app running is install Ubicorn, which is it's not part of FastAPI or not necessarily required, but it's a little web server that supports ASGI, and it's a quick and dirty way to get Ubicorn running locally and having a FastAPI instance to test against. So you would again just run pip install Ubicorn. And then you would write your code, right? So the first thing you would do is include the FastAPI library that you just installed. And then you would instantiate an app by just declaring an instance of the FastAPI class. You define a route using a decorator. So this code @app.get gets interpreted as run this code whenever we're at the URL / and we're making a GET request. Invoke, the FastAPI app, the FastAPI instance, and then run whatever code is inside of this root function. The root function can be named anything you want. It's a good idea to name it something explicit because you're going to see that later. And then, of course, you can put anything you want in the function definition. Then you would start the app. So you would just run uv main:app, right? You were in the main.py file and you had a FastAPI instance of app. And then the reload parameter means that whenever your files change to reload the web server, which is not something you want in production, but here we are running it in development and it's super handy. So then it should come as no surprise, I hope, that you can click on that URL and get to a web page and do a GET request on / and get the results of your message that you output in that root function. So hopefully this is all making sense so far and nothing's going wrong. What I really started to enjoy about working with FastAPI is that you've already started documenting your code. Whether you wanted to or not, you've got a documentation at /docs. And there's actually 2 types of documentation. There's redoc and there's Swagger documentation. Swagger is the handiest because you can actually open up the functionality. You can open it up and run API example calls into the documentation, which is really handy. You see that root right there. It used the function name to create the label. So if you use something explicit like create item or update item, it would nicely try to format that for you. And of course, you can override that if you want to somewhere else in the code. When you open up this little twisty here with the GET, it describes what the successful response looks like. If there's input parameters, it documents those. If there's anything you can type in, you can add JSON, and then you would hit execute. It will show you what the curl output would be if you call that from the command line, and it shows the response body. So all that is nicely taken care of for you, and it helps you to be interactive and be able to test these things as you go. So next you'd want to do is you would want to define a model. So you would import the base model class from PYDANTIC, and that's what kind of starts to affect this validation. Affect the validation around your attributes. You can add attributes to your heart's content to this class that you've extended from the base model. As many as you want. You can nest them. You can include other classes in there, and it will kind of make a nested model. You can use the list definition to include a collection of items inside of there. So you can define a nice little class with these type hints, and there you go. And then the next thing you would do is you would use it in a route. So just like we have the get route, we can have a post route. Decorate it at .post /pet. And so now, not unexpectedly, you can effect a post request to /pet, and you can send it something with name, type, birthday, and species, and it will ideally do something more responsible than just returning it, but that's what this code does right now. So let's go check in with the docs. Look at that, it showed up over there. So it updates the documentation with the code that you added. It shows examples of what you might type in there. You can update that with some extra decorators to really format that nicely, but here you go, you already have it nice and tidy. And the important thing is that PYDANTIC will come along and it will validate the models that get sent to your code. So in this particular instance, on my Swagger documentation, I'm provided with a text box, and I can type in a nice piece of JSON, and I put in all the information, but for birthday, I didn't know the birthday of my lizard, so I typed in February, and that is not a valid date, and it returns a 422 error, and an appropriate error message. And so I've done zero work to do any validation of any code. I don't need to chase my code around. I don't need to look at all the fields, make sure they're there. If I forget to, I'm not going to throw a 500 error. Like, I can write my application with the assumption that the data that's been passed in is totally valid. Similarly, while I'm writing my code in my editor, I can access all of the definitions of all of the classes that I've created, because it knows about them. And if you create really nested classes, you know, that's all that auto completion is right there in the editor. And that's really nice if you come from a background of horrifically nested arrays with arcane names and labels in them, right? I know we're getting away from that, but man, that was hard. So having half your code written for all the validation and a bunch of help and support inside of an IDE is already making me faster. I haven't done anything. Next thing I can do, though, is I can refine the model. It's pretty irresponsible to just, like, you know, make no assumptions about what's coming in. So you can go and define things as optional by using optional, and you can also set default values. So I'm going to set birthday as optional, and I'm going to set the default value to none. I'm going to set species to optional and set that default value to none. Name and type I want to make sure to keep hold of. So I will make those required. And I know that they are strings, and the ... denotes in Python that is a required parameter. So again, I make those changes and it shows up in the documentation. The story so far, we pip installed FastAPI and UVcorn. We created a MAIN.PY file, and we started the app, and then we defined the model and some routes. Pretty good. For anything beyond that, you'd want to involve a third-party library or query a database, or, you know, go get your machine learning model or whatever it is you want to do. And so this is where it's on you to kind of find and set up whatever external functionality you want to use. A good way to do that is with dependency injection, which is allows you to, this example is lifted straight out of the FastAPI documentation. And what they have you do is you create a function, and it returns a dictionary. And then down here, you would add an input parameter of a type dictionary to any of your REST methods. And you would set the default value to the output of the depends class, calling it with the name of the common parameter. So now in this particular case, it's a dictionary. When you're passing it in, you're going to end up with 3 parameters in each of these and read items and read users. So you would get a queue, which is like a query string, and skip and limit, which I assume is related to something like a pager or something like that. So that's a really handy way. And in the case of a database, you would do something like use SQL Alchemy, which is one of the many options you would have, which I like because it does a little bit more ORM functionality. It creates the tables for you and sets up relationships. So you would install it, and then you would add that dependency, and then you would use that dependency down here just in to make sure that there's a database. And then inside of your function, you can call database calls against that DB to your heart's content. In SQL Alchemy land, you actually need to define the table again. So I would need to create something that the database can recognize. It's compatible with the model that I created for FastAPI. But the good news is that, like, if you just hand a database result to FastAPI and it has the same fields, FastAPI will just take it and give you the correct model back. So you don't need to convert or do a lot of mapping. FastAPI just kind of handles that for you. So you would define that table, which SQL Alchemy will go off and allow you to create the table itself and do the ORMy stuff that you love. And then back in FastAPI land, you would just create your CRUD functionality and you would call them from your REST methods. So this is a super short talk, and I didn't want to just spend hours talking about this, because if you're not interested in it, then you can go on with your lives. And if you are interested in it, then you can learn more. Because there's a lot more to cover. There's all kinds of performance stuff. There's really good performance information and how it compares to other frameworks. There's more information about managing documentation and response codes and really kind of pimping out your docs. There's information about WebSockets, authentication. OAuth is built into Starlette and therefore FastAPI, integrating with external libraries, a bunch of cookies, etc. So there's a lot more to cover. And the best place to do that is actually on the amazing and beautiful FastAPI website, which is thoroughly documented and covers a lot of really foundational information that he doesn't even assume that you know a whole lot about anything. So if you want to learn more about Async.io, you can actually just go learn it there. And he's got really great documentation of every aspect of the code. There's a really thriving community on Gitter, yet another way to chat with people on the internet, yay. But if you go there and you ask a question, there's a lot of people there who will likely be around and happy to answer that for you. And then there's, of course, not unexpectedly, a GitHub project for FastAPI. I took the screenshot yesterday, and there was a release as of 2 hours ago. So it's really under active development. It has 18,000 stars, and it's again thoroughly documented, 100% code coverage, etc. So it's a good. I feel safe like basing critical functionality on top of it. And then he's also got a really cool command line tool called Typer. If you need to write command line utilities that correspond to your FastAPI, you can actually, write in addition to your JavaScript front end, you might write a command line tool. And you can use Typer to do that, and you can be confident that it will work well with FastAPI because it's from the same author. Comparing FastAPI to a content management system, it's a blank slate. There's no database, there's no front end, there's no back end, there's no workflow, there's no permission system. You're building multi-language, you're building all of that stuff, revisioning, you're building it all on your own. And if you have to do all that, that would be silly, and you should use a CMS. But if you don't have to do that, or if you want to kind of pick and choose, right, you could also have a ornately complex web infrastructure that involves a content management system and workflow and everything associated with that for your content. And then you could use FastAPI selectively as an alternative backend. And use the front end to kind of knit them together. So it doesn't need to be either or. I would encourage you to consider trying it for your next project. If you have any questions, you can email me at Bluebird@bluebird.io or message me on Twitter using Voxia, where I mostly just retweet things. And other than that, I don't know. That's all the time we have. So thank you.
Thanks, Ali. That was a great talk. I have one of my questions. So, is this, you have this APG and Kong and MuleSoft, all these API platforms. Does this kind of replace that in some sense, or compete with them, or is it just a different piece altogether?
I mean, it's a development framework, so it's probably similar to like the MuleSoft and all those other things.
Got it.
So it would be.
Okay. We have one question coming in from Igor on the chat. It says, did you integrate the FastAPI with any CMS or other technology?
I have not integrated with a CMS. I've used it as an API, and I've integrated it with backend systems. For example, Salt Stack for configuration management is all written in Python, so it's nice to have them both in the same language. But I haven't done any CMS stuff with it because I would actually rather use a CMS. That makes sense. Any CMS that can consume a REST API will happily consume whatever FastAPI wants to put out.
Yeah. We have a few comments. Brittany, Jitesh, Dan, they're saying thanks for the talk. Great presentation.
It's so weird there's no people
I know. This is really weird. Another question from Jitesh. Does it deploy well too fast?
Fast, what is that?
FAAS,
What is the service?
feature as a service probably. Can you find fast, Jitesh? Function as a service.
Function as a service. I mean, it's just a little Python app like that you would run with a ASGI server. And so I don't actually, I'm not familiar with that, but anything that can run a little daemon that can provide a web app.
Great.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about Typer as well.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions? No, all good. Great. Thanks, Ali. Thanks for the talk. It was, lovely having you here. So everybody, the talk would be up live on the YouTube channel of Decoupled Days, in a couple of weeks. As we go along, it takes some time to get uploaded, but yeah, you can see the talk there on the YouTube channel. Awesome. Thanks, Ali. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the speaking. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for coming, everyone.